So, good afternoon and welcome again to your class in RMA 1 Research Methods in Agriculture. So, while waiting for your data to come in, uh, I will just start and just watch again this video again later and just click on the link of the recorded video. So, I just like to remind you of your really midterm and final requirements. So please have some time during your asynchronous session on this following requirements. So we are actually now on, last time we discussed on design and analysis of experiments. So you can review our discussion here. And for this session, which is the second to the last session that we're going to have, we're going to talk about Tyson methods of research in module 3. So to start with, we're going to talk about um, this is I actually um, took this one from during the DACON research conference, via Zoom, entitled "Adapting Research in Times of Pandemic: The Challenges and Opportunities." So, it's there were 4 speakers, and I just got this topics from them, in random. So um, for this is really nice. So I took the advantage of presenting this to you. So this in the frame for the framework of research, there are this figure shows the interrelationships between the components. So there are 4 components here. First, we have philosophical views, which also refers with research designs and research methods. I mean, there are 3 components, and these are actually research approaches, whether qualitative, quantitative, or mixed. So these are research approaches, which the research designs comes with research methods, and then also go back again to the philosophical views, which could be post-positivist, constructivist, transformative, pragmatic, and for the research design could be quantitative or qualitative or mix of them. And for the research methods, we have research questions, data collection, data analysis, interpretation, and validation. So this is just the same with the research method. It's just the same with scientific methods. So when we speak of philosophical worldviews, we have 4: the post-positivism. So that means that refers to the determination, the direct reductionism, empirical observation and measurement, and theory verification. For the constructivism, it refers to understanding multiple participant meanings, social and historical construction, and theory generation. So you can see the constructivism is very different from the post-positivism. It's just like a post from the theory verification to theory generation point of view. And we also have transformative. It means political, power and justice oriented, collaborative, and change oriented. So what differs this from the two? First was that um it's first political and collaborative. And the last one is that pragmatism, the consequences of actions, problems centered and pluralistic, real world experience oriented. So I guess being pragmatic, the pragmatist point of view is very experience oriented compared to the three, and it involves consequences of action. So In your own research, there are, however, criteria for selecting which approach you're going to use. So first, we have the researcher's philosophical worldview. So second is the research design. Third is the research method that you're going to use. Fourth is the research problem itself. And five, the personal experiences of you as a researcher. And the last one, the audience for whom the report will be written. So if you're an agriculturist, for instance, and you are up to experimental type of researches, so these are the criteria or considerations that you're going to um, to consider. So there are features of the qualitative and the quantitative approaches. So for qualitative approaches, there are researchers positioning, collects participant meanings, focuses on single concept or phenomenon, and bring personal values into study, or studies context or setting of participants, validates accuracy of findings, makes interpretation of the data, collaborates with participants, and employ text analysis procedures. For the quantitative approach naman, it tests or verifies theories or explanation, identifies variables to study, so merong dependent and independent variable, relates variables in question or hypothesis. So we have to test the hypothesis, uses standards of validity and reliability, observes and measures information numerically, uses unbiased approaches, and employs statistical procedures or tests. Although in the qualitative approach, you may also employ statistical procedure, which is very different in quantitative. So to make it sure, the two main difference between the two is that for quantitative approach, it's more experimental. For qualitative approach, it's more social study. So another one is that for quantitative, it identifies factors that influence an outcome. And like you can just ask a person what are his or her experiences, and you can identify those factors and derive from the interview, and that's the result of the or the answers to the questions. No? So assess the utility of an intervention, identify the best predictors of an outcome, and test a theory or explanation. For the qualitative naman, to explore or understand better a concept or a phenomenon. If a researcher does not know the important variables to examine, then and if the topic is new, the topic has never been assessed with a certain group of people, and if existing theories do not apply with a particular group under study. So this again applies to an experimental or controlled group. So there are different research designs, as I have mentioned, no, between quantitative and qualitative, and the mix of them. So these are the design that we're talking about. So in some point, they can also say research type, quantitative or qualitative, or they can also research approach, quantitative and qualitative, or research designs. So for quantitative, it's, of course, I have said a while ago, it involves experimental designs, health intervention studies, for example, and in agriculture. And non-experimental designs could also be quasi-experimental studies, surveys, and cross-sectional studies or case control studies that still fall under quantitative, although they are non-experimental. And the longitudinal study designs like the cohort studies and the panel studies. And for the qualitative naman, this can compose of narrative studies, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnographies, case studies. Those are our qualitative. and mixed if they are convergent. So merong quantitative, both qualitative and quantitative. So if they are convergent, explanatory sequential or exploratory sequential, and complex designs with embedded core designs. So the research methods for both for the three types, quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods are for quantitative, we have predetermined and instrument-based questions, performance data, attitude data, observation data, and census data. And it also uses statistical analysis and statistical interpretation. For the qualitative naman, it involves emerging methods, open-ended questions, interview data, observation data, document data, and audiovisual data. So open-ended question could be like, um, it's not only answerable by yes or no. And during your interview, you focus on what details you can get on the interviewee. So test and image analysis, themes, patterns, and interpretation. For the mixed type, both predetermined and emerging methods, and both open and closed-ended questions, and multiple forms of data drawing on all possibilities. And it also uses statistical and text analysis. Across databases interpretation siya. So in terms of different features, a comparison between the qualitative versus quantitative studies are like for in terms of literature review, for qualitative approach, you de-emphasize the literature at onset of research more and more emphasis on preliminary results. But for the quantitative approach, these are bases for planning the study when you speak of literature review. And for instrument and measurements, for qualitative approach, you use unstructured interviews or direct unstructured observations. And you yield words may be adjusted in the middle of data collection. But for quantitative approach, the structured questionnaires or interviews with close-ended or quantifiable questions and easily reduced to numbers. So this is more objective compared to qualitative. And in terms naman, I gave finally So I am talking about, I'm sorry, it's in the middle now of the discussion. So I just presume kasi 25 minutes later na. So I just assume to discuss no and for you to watch out later. So madungo ko nimo Gabe. Hello? Gabe? So you just speak no basig ka nang dili pud makaya sa imong data, so you just try to speak if you can. So anyway, in continuation between the different design no and sampling this, I will just make a wrap up later no before we end so that you will get the idea. So in terms of sampling design, the sample size and general ability, qualitative approaches can be purposive with and fewer in subjects. So I remember I made a qualitative, it's a qualitative study before. It's entitled Agritourism in Samoa. No, its challenges and opportunities. So, but I was just invited to have this research project with me. No, so I'm just a co-staff in here. So actually, in terms, and I was in experimental research kasi we used to like do a lot of samples, no, like we could even have 30 samples per replication per treatment. So it could, if you have a lot of treatments, so it may even raise your samples to 60 to 100 or even 200 or 500, and which are very really a lot, no? But in the qualitative research that we made, we only have um 12 to 15 interviewees, no? So ganun lang siya kaliit. And participants represent the full range of the population under study. So with this 20 with this 20 kabuok na ano for 12 to 15 kabuok na interviewee, so they already represent the whole population. And results are, however, limited to sample population. Like when I say agritourism in Samoa, so it specifically refers to Samoa lang. Although we only have interviewed 12 to 15 of them. And for the quantitative approach naman, the random samples preferred generally large in numbers, as I have said. And the goal is to be able to generalize to target population. So um, when we say we can in experimental, for example, in experiment in agriculture, for example, we do not use a huge land of like a hectare, no, it's too many to count. So we only use like a 10 square meter na plot, no, with about 1,000 population, but that's still too much, no. And in terms of time spent for data collection, yung qualitative is extended, in-depth, unstructured, one-on-one interviews or extensive observation over time. But in the quantitative approach, just generally short. When you say post-harvest, 1 week lang talaga yan. Or depende, no? Or when you say the growth and yield of vegetables, so that could range from 30 days to 3 months or 6 months. No? But for the qualitative approach, you have all the year round to conduct your interview. It's still okay. So in terms of analysis naman, yung qualitative approach is verbatim responses of participants. So it depends really on what the participants will gonna say. Finding themes or concepts consistently raised by participants. So you derive your idea from what you have get from the interviewee, I mean. And in terms of quantitative approach naman, estimation and hypothesis testing is based on like when you get your data, no, it's very objective, so it should always be in quantities or numbers. So you test if you like when you say 100% or using statistic, you say it's statistically different yung mga data mo, or how many percent higher ba siya in terms of yield and so on. And sample estimates applied to target population. So sa 30 samples mo na plant in that treatment, you can say that it's effective against all the rest, no, and it represents everything na, even the hectare. And the process of knowledge generation is very inductive, so specific from the specific to general, and it's also interpretative, so you have to give your interpretation, and collaborative because it's not only from you, but it's also for the for those who you have interviewed. But for the quantitative, it's deductive, no? From general, you make it specific. And you assess existing theories, like you have said, foliar fertilizer will increase yields of plant. So you're going to test this theory and test new application to these theories. And from the presentation of results naman, for the qualitative approach, you show ranges of responses to the topic under study. But for quantitative approach, you use really statistical analysis to summarize results and estimate parameters and presents quantitative estimates of uncertainties. So I hope you understand going back. So you just have got gone out. So before my wrap up, so this is what we are talking about again. So in terms of philosophical views and research methods, and we're still under research design. So the research methods we're going to um, focus on the surveys and the experimental. So so there I have here four scenarios to show you. First scenario, quantitative approach, or the positivist world. In a positivist worldview, experimental design pre-test and post-test measures of attitude. So what we do is the researcher tests a theory by specifying narrow hypotheses and the collection of data to support or refute the hypothesis. And experimental design is also used in which attitudes are assessed both before and after experimental treatment. And the data are collected on an instrument that measures the attitudes like the plant height, the yield, the fruit weight, and so on. And data is analyzed using statistical procedure and hypothesis testing. So I hope you have already gone through all the videos that I have provided to you on module 2, because we are now on module 3. That's all about basic statistics and statistical analysis used for experimental approach. And in the second scenario, under qualitative approach, constructivist worldview, using ethnographic design and observation of behavior. So in this case, the researcher seeks to establish the meaning of a phenomenon from the view of the participants. And this means identifying a culture or sharing group and studying how it develops shared patterns of behavior over time. So this is in the case of ethnography, or the study of the origins of culture or something. And one of the key elements in collecting data is this way is to observe the participants' behaviors during their engagement naman of activities. And in the third scenario, we have the qualitative approach again, but the transformative worldview, or using narrative design and open-ended interviewing. So in this case, the researcher seeks to examine an issue related to the oppression of individuals, for instance. So to study the problem, stories are collected from individual oppression using narrative approach, and then individuals are interviewed at some length to determine how they have personally experienced oppression. So that's the third scenario, and the last scenario is the mixed method approach using pragmatic world view collection of both qualitative and quantitative data sequentially. So you can actually make data, objective data, or and also qualitative na mga surveys. So the researcher bases the inquiry on the assumption that collecting diverse types of data best provides a more complete understanding of a research problem than either with qualitative or quantitative data alone. So that's why i-mix nyo na siya, kasi mas maintindihan lang siya if you are going to mix both approaches. So the study begins with a broad survey in order to generalize results to a population. And in the second phase of the study, another researcher focused on qualitative or open-ended interviews to collect detailed views from participants to help explain the initial quantitative survey. Like for example, you're going to count the number of infected or affected population, and then after that you're going to make a survey of this affected population. So that's it for the types and the research designs and methods. So I have here another video to show you the research types, which also another types that we still the design, but we have some sort of ties. So let's watch this. So these are the types of research. So this can be exploratory, descriptive. Again, going back. So again, going back here. So this can be exploratory, descriptive, the types of research, um, explanatory, or evaluation. But when we speak of design, it's strictly quantitative or qualitative research design. Or but when you say types of research, that could be descriptive, no, exploratory or explanatory evaluation research. And both of these types of research are only specific to qualitative, but both can also be quantitative. So so we're going to talk about here the types of research and the research design. So again, as I have mentioned, the types will be exploratory or so in exploratory research, it attempts to answer the question what, and in the descriptive research is answering the question what and how. And in the explanatory, it will answer the what, how, and why. So in evaluation naman, it measures the effectiveness of a program. That's why, if you notice sa lahat ng mga webinars, no, meron silang evaluation program. So that, because that will serve also as a research. Evaluation questionnaires, I mean. So in the quantitative research designs, we already talked about this one. It emphasizes the use of numbers and statistics to analyze and explain. And the secondary analysis is the analysis of existing data. So example is experimental design, which discover the cause and effect. Wait lang, medyo with so the cause and effect relationship. So for the experimental design, it attempts to discover a cause and effect relationship between two variables. So ano yung effect? Or it could be what are the causes? So independent variable, so it entails independent variable or a variable that brings about change in another variable. So it's the one which causes the effect, so it's, or otherwise it's the cause. While the dependent variable naman is a variable that is changed by the independent variable. So yun yung data na kukunin mo, like the yield, no? So yung treatment, yun yung independent variable. So there are also what we call intervening variables, or the variables that may come between the dependent variables in an experiment. So it could be the weather causes or anything, maka-cause ng disruption. That's why it's intervening variable. So we also have the control group, or those subjects that are not exposed to the experimental variables in an experiment. So you should always have the control group, or treatment one or control, meaning you did not do anything with it, or no treatments or no application. And of course, you know, the importance of that is that to know that yung treatments, if the independent variable or the treatments have really changed the dependent variable or the yield, then how you can only assume that or compare that if the control is very significantly different. So in Hawthorne effect, the phenomenon where subjects' behavior is influenced by the fact that they are being studied. So it's called the Hawthorne effect, no? Ang subject's behavior is influenced itself because they are being studied. And in the experimental group, subjects exposed to the independent variable in an experiment are called experimental groups. So that's very common in quantitative research. We also have survey research or research using a questionnaire or interview to obtain data. So usually survey research ang tawag like what I have said, we did a survey on the agritourism in Samoa. So that's an example of survey research. And then population is called the entire body of people to which the sociologist would like to generalize research findings. So we always say use the population, whether humans, animals, or plants. So we call sample or a segment of the population. So we only say samples because we cannot study all the population. So we just say samples. So qualitative research design is a research design that uses systematic observation. Wait lang. Okay. Very fast. So again, a qualitative research design is a research design that uses systematic observation and focuses on the meanings that people give to their social action. So it's more on observation, ideas, you know, and it's very social. So when you say ethnographic interview, it's a qualitative technique where the researcher talks to people in an effort to learn as much as possible about their behavior. So it's ethnographic. And we say participant observation is also a qualitative method in which the researcher systematically observes the people being studied while participating with them in their activities. So they're participating in a particular group study or whatsoever, and they are being studied with their observed behavior. So that's what we call participant observation. And we also have the so-called case studies. It's also a qualitative technique involving the intensive observation of a particular person, group, or event. So that's why naka-case siya, case study. So there are also case studies which are done through computerized, bioinformatics ang tawag, for example. So we also have triangulation or the use of multiple, usually three techniques to gather or analyze research data. So you can use exploratory or descriptive, experimental. So that's when you use three of them, that's triangulation. So content analysis naman is a research that examines and analyzes communication. So that's content analysis. So that's the reference for this presentation link. So thank you very much for watching or listening to this video, and we cannot do anything with technical problems in your part. So you just watch on the link video, and I hope to see you next time for FPA protocols, for fertilizer bioefficacy test. So I've been I'm just going to present this to you, and also hopefully I can give you also the survey operation when it's time. So if you have questions, you just message me on the chat box. Okay, so thank you again, and I hope to see you again next time, Gabe.